Good.
I got birthday balloons all around me right now.
You got birthday balloons. Fredo's out here celebrating.
That's right. It's birthday
I wonder if I
day.
could. Oh yeah, we are live. We are live. Look at that. We did it. We made
We're
it.
here.
It has been quite some. It's actually been a month since we last hung out, huh?
But we back outside, McKay. We back outside today. Back outside, boys. Back outside.
We'll just chat. We'll chat for a little bit. See if anybody gives some people some time to jump in.
Yeah.
Where are we joining? Where are you joining us from today?
Man, I am from the. I'm from what one of Eli's classmates. What did he say the other day? We had a birthday party for him. They came over to the house. He said, "It's like your house is like you have like a small mansion." I'm like, wait, what? We have a regular size house, man. So
that's why we need the joy and just the imagination of kids is what we call a small space. They're like, yo, this is the spot. This is huge. This is what I'm going after in life.
I'm like, dang, I need to get that legal on the actual house docs. Like instead of it saying like 1,280 square feet, which is like my house layout, it just says small mansion. He either said small mansion or mini mansion. He's like, this is like a mini mansion. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Thanks. I appreciate that. That's a good way to reframe the size of my house.
That's
yeah, we are filming. I'm live here at the house. So at the study, this is my desk. This is where I kind of, this is where I meet with God right here on this wood table.
Is that where you find like you get most of your work done is like the kitchen table?
Or I try to stay on the kitchen table, so I feel like that's a good spot for me. It actually keeps me like engaged in the rhythm of the house. It's like doing stuff, right? So I know a lot of people that got nice studies and whatnot, but like I heard from Tim Keller years ago, they said, "How did you like get work done and be around your kids?" He's like, "I just did work around my kids." Like he said something to that extent, and I took note of that. Like, dang, Tim, another TK piece of gold right there. So that's good.
Hello, everybody joining the stream. We'll get started in just a couple minutes here.
What's up, Guillermo de la Para? What's up, bro? Hopefully I'm saying that right. Why aren't you preaching end times? Jesus is about to return. Brother, I'm with you, man. He's close to returning. Anytime, I'll say it like this, bro, straight up. We are in the end time. Since Jesus resurrected from the dead, the New Testament says we're living in the last days, right? So at any moment he can return. And yes, anytime we share parts of good news about his kingdom coming, we are in fact preaching about the end. So I'm not sure, if you're getting at maybe a particular stream of theology that talks about the end, but brother, I would say when Jesus taught us to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done, he was reminding us that there is another kingdom coming. So yeah, I'm ready for that one too, man. So, but I appreciate your question. So
that's why I wanted to let you answer that, because I had no idea how to answer that question. Yeah. That is a tough one.
Some theological camps would say like, they would really intensify this current moment, like 2023, look at the world. And I would say, well, if you zoom out and look at church history, there's probably a lot of moments where people would say, yo, 1842, look at the world, this is crazy, it's all going to end, so yeah, I think there's great caution and wisdom in observing the times, not being naive, but then also like understanding the big picture of what Jesus has been saying since the beginning. So,
and I feel like it's when it comes to end times, it's more about just as believers remembering that the Lord is returning and posturing ourselves that way to be sharing the gospel, preaching or not. Just sharing our lives in the gospel with people, because we know that the Lord is going to return. We don't know when, but always just being ready and willing to have those conversations with people because of that return.
Right. That's good. All right, man.
So
Conflict, bro. You ready to have some conflict?
yeah, we're in this new series. We're in this new series called Oblivious. We just finished up Essentials before that. We talked about that on the last stream. Some great sermons. If you haven't seen those sermons, we have all of them live on our YouTube channel. I highly recommend going back and listening to them again or listening to them the first time. But now we're in Oblivious. We're shifting into trying to see how we see other people. Today's culture is very self-focused, do what's best for me and me only. How do, as Christians, we start to see the other people around us and remove the focus from us, but back to the mission that God's called us to? Do you have any thoughts on just the idea of this sermon series and what we're trying to go after?
Yeah, I think, the word oblivious, obviously, it, it's used in a lot of different ways, right? I'm chuckling because oftentimes it's used in a lighthearted, bro, you're so oblivious to what's going on, or you missed the obvious thing. But then I do think just speaking prophetically, I think it's fair to say that in our relationships, we're oftentimes very oblivious to how other people are doing, where they're actually at in life. Because as you mentioned, we have such a self-focused kind of approach to our daily lives that we can just miss the reality of what other people might be carrying, And I think that's especially true of Christians. We're oftentimes oblivious to God, right? We're unaware of what he's doing, what he's up to, especially in our conflict, which is what Pastor Matt talked about this past weekend, right? How to deal with conflict. And so,
right.
I think if anyone's watching this, they would probably say they've met plenty of Christians who believe the right things, say the right things, and yet are still somewhat immature when it comes to dealing with conflict. So, yeah.
All right. Well, then let's just take it there. Let's start talking about this relational conflict. I am horrible at it because my personality type is I avoid conflict at all possible costs.
Right.
And so, I was personally convicted when Pastor Matt was talking about when you're trying to resolve a conflict.
I'm not sure what a conflict is, bro. That sounds serious.
I've been
conflict checked out, bro.
I have been running around all day getting prepared for YouthCon. Parents, if you haven't signed your kids up for YouthCon, it's this Friday. You could still register.
Look at the way he just snuck that in.
Little shameless plug there.
And we already got a YouthCon sneak-in plug. This dude.
Hey, man, I already know there's parents that are just tired trying to get through it, and they've have the intent to sign their kids up, and it slipped their mind. So this is their reminder. But anyway, yes, I avoid conflict. I internalize. I keep it all in. And when it comes time to resolve it, I'm usually the person that's going to say, you always do this or you never do this. I kind of use those big descriptors. So that's one thing I was I can't talk, man. Convicted by of making sure that you stay on what currently caused the hurt and resolve that before you jump into other things or past hurts and stuff like that. I don't know where I was going with that, but that was just what stuck out to me from the sermon on Sunday.
Good, man? That's good. I think for me, initially, I think pretty early on in the message, Pastor Matt opened up with, many of us are pretty bad at conflict, and that's okay. We just need to name it for what it is. But then he said, Jesus is very good at conflict. And I from the jump, I was just immediately grappled with that truth. Jesus is very good at conflict. He's very good at handling it. And then as you go through the story of his life through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you actually find him dealing with a ton of conflict throughout most of those stories that we have recorded in there. And so, I just thought to myself, man, what another good reason to continue to stay close to him is to realize that what I'm scared to often deal with, what I'm actually just bad at, but what constantly comes up in my life and in my relationship, especially with those who I'm closest to, is conflict. So why not learn from the rabbi himself on what that could look like, So that initial thought stuck out to me. And then, I think as Pastor Matt got pretty practical in the sermon on how we actually directly deal with it, just his initial exploration of anger and the role of anger in our lives, I thought was significant. It's just been a personal season for me where I think I've felt God invite me more and more to examine my anger, examine some really deep places of anger in my life. and how it's affecting me, my soul, and my life with God, my soul, my life with people, my family, those close to me, right? Like, so that just kind of his section there and addressing first in the how-to part, I thought was immensely helpful. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was great. It was great how Pastor Matt took it from, I think, like you were saying, from a very big perspective and bringing it all the way down to like, all right, first McKay has to figure out how to handle conflict within himself before I can start addressing conflict with the people that are around me and the friends I have and my wife and my family and all those different kind of things. Because the truth of the matter is we're all broken people, and you're going to run into conflict with everybody at some point in your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's the first thing that we first got to just be able to embrace. Like it's unavoidable. Like it's just inevitable. Like Q Thanos saying I'm inevitable, like conflict is very much like that. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, and until you're willing to like get into the inner conflict that you're dealing with, then it's going to really stunt your ability to make progress with people in your relationships, and that could be, like I mentioned, my anger is one example. I think any particular emotion can be something that holds you back in dealing with your conflict in healthy ways, right? It could be shame, like you could just be holding on to an immense shame. Maybe if you came out of a marriage situation that was it just ended in failure, right, in separation, like oftentimes ex-spouses carry that kind of shame, and so because of what happened to them in the past, like it's really hard for them to go to healthy environments of conflict because there's a lot of still like fear from the past, right? We have insecurity. Maybe we didn't experience healthy environments where we could actually say things that we were not okay with, things that we disagreed with, right? And so security is a big thing for people, not feeling like they are in a secure place so that they can then share what bothered them, right? Or how they were hurt, or maybe give them the freedom to actually acknowledge where they were wrong and ask for forgiveness, right? There's a lot of internal things that I think have to be rightly identified in yourself, and then allowing that to actually like empower you to move forward. Like it almost frees you up then to actually deal with what you need to deal with, so it's critical.
Right. And if you're just jumping into the stream now, Pastor Fredo and I are talking about last week's message with Pastor Matt. If you have questions about the sermon and this series, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will do our best to answer those questions for you guys. We're talking relational conflict today. Relational conflict. Fredo and I are actually going to argue on stream. So okay, I'm thinking through everything you're saying. One thing when it comes to conflict that I'm very insecure in is growing up, conflict meant I was in trouble. I was going to lose privileges. I was going to lose, just freedoms and all those kinds of things as I was a kid. And there was really no healthy conversation in my family of like, this is the conflict. This is where you're wrong. This is where I'm wrong. And I didn't have those kind of spaces to talk through those things and have healthy conflict was never shown to me or practiced in my house. So as I'm now 4 years married, trying to figure this out with my wife, I guess my question for you would be, what are some things that you have learned, or some things that really struck you from the sermon of like, oh yeah, this is a really good tip for how to start addressing and navigating conflict. Let's start with family, addressing and navigating conflict with family.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think again, going back to his first point on waiting until I'm not angry is immensely helpful, specifically in the sense that it's not just about you calming down and then you go and talk about something, but it's you getting to a place where you allow your anger to actually serve you, like rather than being enslaved by the anger and so like under its power and a grip over you, but like you actually learn from it, right? So often anger is coming from a place of like what we value has been harmed or what we value is threatened, right? So oftentimes anger could rightly instruct us, give us insight, be an invitation from God to learn something, right? So I am finding in my own relational conflict that if I treat anger as a classroom, I can either sit in it and like just thrash the room up, right? Like making a mess, or I can actually like listen to where it's coming from, what do I feel like is being threatened that I'm trying to protect? What expectation was not met? How was I wronged? Like it helps me like begin to narrow in, like this emotion is not all bad, but if I don't address it, it can become very, very ugly very quickly. Right. And so allowing it to instruct me, like allow my anger to give me insight, allow it to be a way for God to meet me. Like people, I still think are not, they haven't quite developed a theology that says that God is in every single emotion. Right. And so every emotion, it creates an opportunity for you to encounter God. Like you can meet God in your anger in the same way you can meet him as you lift your hands singing a worship song with great joy, right? And so I think what I've been learning lately is allowing my emotions to inform me about something that maybe I don't quite see in myself yet, right? And then asking God to reveal it to me. I'm hurt by this, I'm bothered by this, I'm trying to protect this. Help me understand what's going on here. And then once I've been able to maybe identify a few things, I feel like I can move forward, in talking with whoever I need to talk to, which oftentimes it's like Ashley, right? It's my wife, or it's my kids. It are kind of like the primary training ground of my relationships right now, So I think that has been immensely helpful to me. Matt said in the sermon, argue like you're right and listen like you're wrong. I think it's just a great thing to reflect on, right? Like listening with a curious potential of like, you have something to learn. Right. And let's imagine a world in which multiple things are true at the same exact time. Like McKay was hurt. McKay has a right to be frustrated. And also like McKay has something to learn. And like he let this little side punch get out, right? Or whatever happened. Like, I think, anytime I can sit back and say, Fredo, maybe multiple things are true that you're just not quite seeing. I think that's massive, So I like this little clip about, arguing, like defending yourself. And man, not all of us are great attorneys, man. Maybe we all didn't go to law school, but we are defending ourselves. And so, there's a way for us to argue like we're right. But I liked his idea of like, listen from the perspective that you actually are wrong. And you almost come in with like a tell me more mindset, tell me more, let me hear more from you.
Yeah.
And get a full picture.
We did get a question from Brian, and I want to ask that. But before we get to that one, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that thought of, anger as a classroom. This is going to be kind of more towards the guys, but I feel like a lot of younger men are feeling more angry and don't know how to navigate or express that without being labeled as, toxic. It's toxic masculinity. You can never be angry at things. You have to only show love. So in your experience of navigating that anger, because this is something I resonate with, I feel like I have a lot of anger and I'm trying to bring that to the Lord. What are some things you learned in your personal life when you had anger to address in a healthier, more Christ-like way? Does that make sense? Is that a good question?
A little bit, yeah. Rephrase it again. Like I'm trying to get the gist of what you're asking.
If you're talking to a young man that is experiencing a lot of anger, what are some things you learned in your life to address that anger in a healthy way instead of, that toxic masculinity type of way that anger is kind of only viewed as in young men?
Oh yeah, man. I would say, man, the first thing would be prayer. I still have finding in myself like just an immense relief when it comes to allowing anger, as strange as it sounds, to become a catalyst for prayer. I think allowing any emotion, especially for young guys, to become a catalyst for prayer, because oftentimes, for men in particular, we don't have the strength to allow for like delayed gratification to come in, right? And so if we're angry, we're gonna like just smack something. I don't know why I said angry, but if we're angry, we're gonna hit something. Which is, I think, generally why guys, in particular young men, struggle with overindulging in like entertainment, whether it's gaming, whether it's movies, whether it's sports gambling, fantasy, whether it's like pornography, right? Because I think we have this just natural reaction. I'm feeling this, so I'm going to act on it. And so I almost would reframe it and say, let's feel it and like let's actually pray through it and allow it to be a frustrating moment, and where you just literally say to God, here's all the things I want to do, God. And I picked some of that up from the Psalms. Like there's so many Psalms where either David or other psalmists are just saying to God directly, here is everything I'm feeling, and here is exactly what I want to do.
Yeah.
I think the young guys need to have a bigger vision of how their life with God actually is, in which they actually have permission to be human. And God honors and dignifies how we're feeling and dealing with things, and offers us, I think, a more healthier outlet than just instant gratification for whatever that impulse is in the moment. You know, whether it's like kind of an emotional kind of outrage, or it's just isolation and withdrawal, right? Like, imagine another outlet that actually like honors the way you're feeling, but doesn't destroy your soul in the process or your relationships, you know? And so it sounds like a pad Christian answer, but I'm telling you, man, like allowing your emotions to become a catalyst for prayer could be immensely helpful, you know? And so, and without trying to butter it up, like sometimes I say, God, I am so pissed right now. God, I am deeply angered. God, my body feels some kind of way right now. Like I just say it as it is, you know, without a kind of guilt. And so I think that I would encourage our young men to initially take that step forward. So,
yeah, that's great. That's fire. That's a word right there. Let's get into, we have one question here from Brian. He asked, if you have an aging conflict, something hurt you some time back, is there a time when it is better to figure out how to let it go on your own, or do you still need to get into it with the person? That's a good question, Brian.
Man,
I'll let Fredo take the lead on that one.
If you can discern that it continues to resurface, this aging conflict, if it continues to resurface, I would imagine that you are not in a place where you can just let it go on your own, but you actually do need to you do need to address it, right? And that's assuming the relationship is still present and current in the moment, to where like you can, you know. But I do wonder though if there is a place for kind of discernment that says, are these the kinds of faults that Scripture says for me to forgive quickly, right? To overcome faults. Like there are moments in which I think we do hold on to minor things that need to be just like ways for us to model the life, the suffering, and the forgiveness of Jesus, and just say, you know what, I'm gonna overcome that fault with just love and grace. There is, I think, a time though to realize, man, this conflict continues to surface, and by that I mean it's festering in you. Like this is the way you primarily view that individual, or the way they do that certain thing, right? Like if there's a continuous cycle you feel yourself in, and you haven't been able to let it go, even though it is something that you feel like is in the past, or it has aged, so you feel like, wow, I should be beyond this, but I'm not. I think there is probably some wisdom that says, yo, you should address this. Like it's been sitting here for a minute. Obviously it's on your mind. It comes up often anytime your spouse or your friend says this or does this. I think it's time to bring it up, you know, and just to name it for what is. Like even if that means, yo, this has like been in me for some time. I'm somewhat embarrassed that I still feel this way and think this way, because this feels like it was so long ago, but I just got to get it out. I need to say this, you know, like I keep coming back to this one moment where this was said, or where this thing happened, and I'm not sure if maybe we have fully addressed it, you know. And sometimes that conversation could happen just between the two of you. Maybe if you've kind of walked that bridge and crossed that bridge before, like maybe this means like a third party sits in with you, you know. But yeah, I think aging conflicts are kind of tricky, because there is sometimes a moment to just internally say, this is on me. I need to grow through this and release it. And there's also, I think, a moment to say, no, I need to bring this to the person, and just humbly say, yo, for whatever reason, I'm still carrying this, and I need your help processing it. I need to say this, and we need to figure this out, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's, I mean, I feel like it's a uniquely tough challenge, because obviously we will, as Christians, we want to have reconciliation. We want to be able to heal from these conflicts and find healthier places. But again, it's one of those things, just navigating. How do you say, okay, like we've done the work, and there's the point of this is now we're going to go separate ways versus continually kind of processing through it and reaching that middle ground of like, okay, there's forgiveness and there's grace and healing from both of these. Thank you for that question, Brian. That was a great question.
That's a great thought, Brian. So, and honestly, I think, sometimes I flippantly use the word discernment when I'm trying to distinguish between, but I do think there is a place for, in our journeys with God, as we continue to grow, we become sensitive to his leading, we become sensitive to his voice, and you do learn how to discern through the Holy Spirit at work in you what you need to release internally on your own and grow up through that, and also what you need to vocalize and bring out. The world is a complex place. Our relationships are complex relationships, and so they require different decisions and different outcomes and approaches at different moments of our lives, and so that's why sometimes you read Proverbs and they almost sound like they're talking backwards, like they're a bit contradictory. Because there is a time and a place to rebuke someone, and there's also a time and a place to not rebuke that person, right? Because certain moments call for certain actions, and so there is, I think there is a role for discernment to navigate through that. So,
have you experienced anything like Brian's talking about? Have you had any aging conflict that needed just addressing, and it either went well or didn't well that you could share?
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, my natural wiring is to not address things, right? So I almost fall to one side, and sometimes I mask it in maturity. Like, look how understanding I am. I'm not ever bothered by anything. But that's not true. I think I erred on the side of just allowing it to be something that played itself out, would get worked out. Just, I don't need to bring up every little thing that's bothering me, But I over time I realized that's probably not the healthiest approach either, and so, but there's been moments certainly where I realized, what, this is an internal thing. This is a minor fault. God give them grace. I need grace. I got tons of minor faults, and then there were other ones that I could tell needed to be addressed because of the way that they continue to come up and how poorly it was impacting the relationship. Sometimes there's minor things that aren't lasting. There's other times that they leave a bitter taste in your mouth, and you can tell it really has you feeling some kind of way, So when I find myself feeling some kind of way about something, that's a flag. That's an invitation from God through the Spirit. Yo, address this. This needs to be mentioned. Be kind, be respectful, but this needs to come out. And choose your words carefully, and let's get down to business. So,
the choosing your words carefully is a major key. Because I have had plenty of conflicts where I did not choose my words carefully, and it made a small campfire into a forest fire. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think as Matt was talking about narrowing my topic, getting it down as best you can. We can do that often with our words, just taking our time, being patient, not just saying everything that we're feeling on the inside, give it time, and so there's a reason why James says our words can start fires. The word can be like a ship's udder, it's a bridle in the mouth of a horse. They will do something either very constructive and beautiful, watching a ship move through the waters. It's magnificent, to be on one is beautiful, to feel the wind and to watch the movement, and to realize an udder is directing that course through a lot of different challenges, right? That's a beautiful image. But then, he also says this whole thing will set the IE on fire during fire season, man. So I think choosing words carefully is so crucial, and narrowing it down. So, and some of that just comes out of maturity, right? Realizing that we give ourselves to a lot of spaces where people are not careful with their words. They're not careful in the comment section. God knows,
right?
They're not careful with their posts, right? They're not careful with who they let in give words to them, right? And so that then leaks out into our relationships, and especially in our conflict, where we're just not careful with words. God created the universe with words, so that should tell us something about their power.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And I think for anyone that might be in my camp of, you're in an argument and I'll be like, I know I shouldn't say this thing, but I'm so angry and here it goes. And now I can't bring it back. One of the things I've kind of um, started to address, I'm nowhere near perfect at this, but when I start to feel those angry words coming out, like with Viv and I'll say, hey, I need 5 minutes to go cool down for a second. And I'll come back and we'll start this conversation again. And I'll leave my phone, I'll leave any device so that Viv knows I'm not just scrolling or putting a blanket over it, but I'll go in, ask the Lord, hey, be with me in this. Holy Spirit, feel me, help me argue fairly and not in a hateful or an intense kind of way. And I'll let that simmer for a second. And, then I'm able to come back in like, okay, I've cooled down a little bit. I've let the emotions sit. I've asked the Lord back into this. And that all sounds very, Christianese, but that's one thing I've learned as a young adult navigating early marriage. Like, okay, I can't just say all these things that I want to say. I have to be gracious in how I, resolve conflict while also staying true to what actually happened, not saying, this is always this, always that kind of thing. Yeah, that's just one thing I've learned.
Yeah. You know what? To that though, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I feel like that directly relates to something that Brian just shared right now. Coming from an old man. Wow, Brian. Yeah, old man, Brian. Okay. He said a great gift that you can offer is to actually allow them to not choose their words carefully. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. So, and I think that kind of ties into what you were just sharing too. Like, they give permission to people to say things how they need to say them, and not. He said, "Be slow to take new offense in the convo based on how they share that." Yeah, that's that's
wow.
huge.
That's
if I
bar.
can count the amount of times where I've been re-offended by the way Ashley has said something, knowing that she's trying her best to just say what she's feeling. Yeah, so there's great wisdom in that. So
yeah,
that's good.
One part I was laughing at a lot was when Matt was talking about the tone conversation.
Oh yeah, Queen of Tone, Tammy.
Yeah,
Queen of Tone.
Yeah, that whole tone conversation. If Viv says something just slightly different than her normal tone of voice, I'm like, what do you mean by that, dude? You trying to start another fight or what?
Yeah.
So one thing I was thinking through as you're kind of talking through that last point, you said, there's some faults that are small that you just need to have grace for it and release. And then there's some faults that are bigger that need to be talked through and find resolution in. To the best of your ability, what would you say if one person in this conflict sees a minor fault as a big deal and the other person doesn't see a minor fault as that kind of same level of intensity? Because we're all different people. We all have different, I guess, triggers for these faults that might not be the same as everybody else. Like, I know there's faults that I have that someone else might not take as serious or see as big of a deal. So as we're navigating relationships and conflicts with so many different people, what is the best way as Christians to present ourselves of minor faults versus these bigger kind of issues?
Yeah, if I'm hearing you right, it almost seems like at that point you need to start to have a expectations conversation, right? Because maybe there's an expectation on their end that is making what you feel like is minor be a major thing for them. Which could mean that what's minor for you is actually a really high value for them. And it's important for you out of love to listen to their value. And it's important for them to express their expectation, clarify it, state it for what it is. The two of you agree on it, and then you kind of move forward. You re-up. So, and to me, that's an act of love. Like, that feels like what love does, right? It compromises, it listens, it sacrifices, right? And so, yeah, maybe there is a place where you're like, yeah, you know what? Dang, there are things that I have been kind of labeled as, like, I've been labeling as minor. I've heard from you they are not minor. And love, I actually want to meet you in that place. Like, I want to figure that out with you, and vice versa. And so I do think there's some beauty in that can happen as you come to understand someone better. And maybe in just clarifying to them why you feel like it's a minor thing might even help them a little bit too. Like, there's a lot of discovery that just goes on.
Right.
And so I would even say too, after being married for 12 years, like the majors and the minors have somewhat been the same, but there's also been shifts because our seasons are different now. Like the way we do life is a bit different now, right? And so having a place where we can regularly dialogue has been really, really beneficial for us to kind of rediscover really what is major and what's minor. And then out of love, being willing to meet each other on those expectations that we both agreed on, so.
Yeah. Brian today is just dropping heat in the chat. He said, lean into their experience over the fault itself. A flat tire can be a minor inconvenience or take someone's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's huge, man. That's huge. Yeah, I think that's been helpful for my marriage as of late too. Yeah, because Ash has learned from my experience why certain things for me are major, and also vice versa, right? Mm-hmm. And so I've even allowed her experience to inform what I share, when I share it, how I share it, right? Because that's super, super critical. And so because the way that she's gone through life, the way that she's gone through relationships has very much shaped those values systems for her, and and vice versa. So it's helpful, man. It's really, really helpful.
It's helpful. There's just tons of grace that's needed in all of these. I think that's one of the big, kind of the big driving points from these, first two sermons that I've listened to in this series, is that we are in a very ungracious culture right now. I don't think we offer a lot of grace to people that we disagree with or have conflict with. The truth of the matter is like, as Christians, we've been offered unlimited grace, and we are called to offer that grace to others as well. I didn't have much of a thought after that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that taps into the environment for which this relationship is rooted in, right? Like if we're talking about the context of marriage, you are in a covenant with this person, right? And that covenant is founded on grace that comes not from yourself, but it is a grace that comes from above. It's a grace that comes from outside, right? The love that we're able to express faithfully is a love that doesn't come from ourselves, but it's a love that comes from the outside, right? And so, that is an ongoing channel that has to be open, flowing, right? Continually pouring in, forgive others just as God in Christ has forgiven you, right? So much of our relational abilities flows from a deeper connection and foundation that is in God, that's in the gospel of Jesus. And so, like the grace is absolutely key, and maybe that's even a good rehearsal for some folks too, like as they enter into hard conversations, is like establishing we're in an environment of grace, like we are in a place of grace right now, and so there's going to be understanding, there's going to be forgiveness, and so that could hopefully free them up to actually say what they need to say, say what you need to say. Call back. And also give them permission and the freedom to like really be clear as to how they were hurt, because sometimes we hold back and not realizing that like we're actually withholding grace, like we're withholding their ability to receive grace from God for that area of their life that you refuse to acknowledge or help them see in themselves,
Right.
And so like if Ash never brings out my blind spots and the things that I need to address because they are major and I've been treating them as minor, like that's a like a blockage, right, of me actually getting grace from God in that area, or if I just for my own sake continue to be blind to those things and to ignore them, to know that they're there, but to refuse to address them, like I'm cutting off the grace of God for me in that area of my life, because God loves the very broken Alfredo that I refuse to acknowledge in this area,
Right.
And his desire is actually to grow me through that thing, And so, I think your point on grace is so critical, man. So,
man,
we need good news, man. We need good news.
that is good stuff right there. I realize at the beginning of this conversation I led with just family. So let's take a little sidestep from talking conflict in maybe marriage. You and I are in community together. And there's two things I want to address first. First, I want to, if you since I've had the privilege to kind of do life really closely with you, could you share some of like the small, maybe not small, share some of the stories you've been telling me of just conflict you've had with your kids, not necessarily like discipline, but I know your daughter brought something to you the other day that technically is conflict, and you were just processing through that and navigating that. And I think that's something that maybe many parents are thinking through, like, okay, how do I navigate conflict with my kids where I'm the rule maker and the discipliner, but I also want to practice healthy conflict resolution with my children and show them how to navigate some of this. Do you have any thoughts on that, or any words you would share? I'm putting you on the spot, but
Yeah, no, I mean, I just think a friend of mine, he had recently shared something that stuck to me. Rich, he had shared, we're raising our kids, but our kids are also raising us.
Mm,
I thought that was a great, humble way to view yourself as a parent, that you're also learning in this journey. And so I've been trying to hold that closely in certain moments, like when I'm driving in the car and Ella happens to almost like randomly just share her heart about what she feels like she hasn't experienced from us, and it's hurt her. And it was surprising, but I was like really surprised. Yeah, I was surprised, but also so proud of her, like as a little 5-year-old about to turn 6, like her just sharing what she's experienced from us and how maybe we have not been face to face with her or attentive to her when she's doing something, and not in a way that's like she's overly needy and we're always like
mhm.
with her and she demands every second of our time, but like just an observation she made about something we do when she's doing something. And so I just sat with me and I thought like, oh wow, yeah, like I need to grow through this and not neglect what she's saying just because she's 5, and she doesn't
Right.
understand all of daddy's life or what we got to do today, so
Mhm.
yeah, I think just allowing, I'm raising my kids, but my kids are also raising me.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to learn from them as much as I can, so yeah, that happened to be how she maybe wants us to give her particular attention when she's trying new things. And when
Mhm.
she's doing things she likes to do, she likes to know that we're also involved with her too, and not just letting her do her thing. So it was a really heartfelt moment that she just happened to share as we're driving somewhere, and I thought, dang, I need to sit with her. Great. So
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on blast. I just remember you sharing that, and the thoughts you had, I felt like were so profound of just navigating. I don't have kids yet. My wife and I are pregnant, but I can only imagine that, as I'm working, trying to pay the bills, if I get the sinner in me, if I get that from my kids of like, you don't hang out with me enough, I'm be like, don't you know what I'm doing all day? Like,
yeah.
but so let's kind of shift a little bit more. Again, let's start talking navigating some of these conflicts with friends. We have a couple more minutes left. Um, as we were thinking, preparing for this live stream and stuff like that, I was thinking through our community group's infamous um, conflict in 2020 as we were navigating. Are we going to keep doing this group? We're all online. No one wants to do this. Or are we going to, hear each other and push through?
Yeah. Oh man, no one had conflict in 2020, dude. It was so peachy, man. I don't know what you.
It was for me. I was at home. I didn't have to go anywhere. I loved it. I get to stay inside all day. I ain't got to go have face to face. This is
Bro,
perfect.
for real, for real.
um, so yeah, let's I don't know if I have any questions. Again, chat, if you guys got questions, feel free to drop it in there. We don't have a script for this. We're just going off the fly, but
Yeah, some of the initial thoughts that came to my mind as you, called back to that moment and like that critical situation for us all. I mean, I think what we did our best in was to just hold space for each other right now. So number one, we just created space where everyone could be seen and heard,
mhm,
however they were, wherever they were, right? Secondly, we did not try to fix everything right away. Like we weren't trying to fix anyone or dismiss anyone's particular perspective. And then I felt like thirdly, we we I felt like in that moment we just recommitted to each other that we were going to work through this together. That
mhm.
like it wasn't going to be a conflict that like sent us separate ways and then we would eventually come back, that we would continue to press through even though we did not have all the answers. And I think that was really, really important. Um, And it was in the pressing through that I felt like we found some healing. We got clarification from each other. I think we reestablished what our commitment meant and like what the expectations were for everyone, right? Because we could all say we're committed, but we all have different expectations as to what that commitment means, right? And so I felt like we decided, okay, let's stay together, let's press through. And as we press through, we're not only going to double down on the commitment, but we're going to re-clarify what that commitment looks like and what we owe each other, you know? And so, yeah, it was a beautiful time for us. I think to repent of some ways that we had gotten sloppy in our relationships, maybe ignoring one another, and then reestablishing what we were hoping for, you know. So it was a pivotal time. So it was a great moment for us to actually put on display Christian community, versus other kinds of community where, all right, well, this isn't meeting my needs, I'm out, you know.
And that's honestly, like, as I think back to that conflict, like the night where we were like, all right, we're going to talk about this, I walked into that fully expecting, you know, cynical me, fully expecting for our group to end that night. And I was like, all right, I'll maybe see him again around campus, but now it's time to go find a new group. Viv and I are going to have to find a new community, because conflict was just not, resolving conflict was not something I practiced growing up. So I was like, all right, God bless you, Godspeed. We'll see you around the depot at Palm. Like,
and so we see you walking down the aisle at church, man. But today's
So it's been so long now. I don't know. I'm sure I didn't respond to everything perfectly, but it was a great example for Viv and I, and myself especially, of like, okay, this is how, exactly like what you're saying, we give space, we allow people to feel heard. And I'm sure everybody at one point said something that was maybe offensive to somebody else, but we didn't take offense. We didn't take offense to it in that moment. We recognized the moment that we were in, and when there's hurt, there's some real, kind of like Brian was saying, there's some real genuine feelings that aren't going to come out very clean and very, very nice, but giving each other the space to process through those, and then repent and ask forgiveness in those moments. So. Yeah.
That's good. Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any other final thoughts? Any other advice for friends navigating conflict?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the degree you feel committed to that relationship, that friendship, should be to the degree that you're willing to stay in it and work through the conflict. You know, the Proverbs are very clear. Friendship is not something you just find any day on the street anywhere, right? Like, it's a rare thing. And so when you have it, you should treat it as the rarity that it is, you know, and work to protect it, deal with the conflict, you know. Especially, I think this is the case at every stage of life too. Like, not just in your early years, not just in your 20s or your 30s, but like even people in their 40s and 50s, like sometimes they find themselves in more isolation because they did not handle old friendships well. You know, and now they find themselves looking around like, dang, where are my actual people at? Like, I've forged very shallow relationships, and that's because I was unwilling to go to more challenging places with my other ones, you know. And so if you're in a younger season of life, I would encourage you, receive the words of Scripture. Friendship is rare. So if you have it, hold on to it. And to the degree that that other person's ready to be committed as you are, like, work through the conflict, you know. So yeah, and if you're grieving the loss of something, like, that happens too. I think, like, knowing at times, man, there's a moment to walk away, like, dang, I did everything I could in this, and like, God, this sucks that it's over now, you know. I think there's times for that happen, you know, that happens. So Psalm 42 is a good example where the psalmist says, I no longer walk to the house of God with the same crowd that I used to, right? That's a Fredo paraphrase, but it's clear that the psalmist is saying who he journeys with has changed. Like, his community has changed. We don't know the source of it, but we at least know, like, that's what he's bearing witness to some of the pain and some of the kind of depression that I think is coming out of Psalm 42. And so that's a real season to be in too, you know. So, but may God provide a new relationship on the other side of this for you. So,
yeah, that's so good. Such a good word. Chat, thank you for hanging out with us today. This weekend is Campus Pastor Weekend. So if you're attending in person, your campus pastor will be preaching for you. If you're going to be joining us online, we're going to hear from our one and only Pastor Fredo Ramos. It's going to be a great word. What else we got? YouthCon, like I said, is coming up. Parents, get your kids signed up. It's going to be a great time. It's going to be tons of fun. We have a couple speakers, games. It's just going to be a blast.
When are we going live here again, bro? What's the plan?
I was getting there, man. I was just about to say that. We will be going live on the first Tuesday of every month, doing stuff like this.
That's
roughly 45 minutes to 50 minutes of just talking through our sermon series, what we're doing here at Sandals Church. If you have questions about this series, feel free to jump in and put them in the chat. We will do our best to answer them for you. That's all I got. Pastor Fredo, you got anything else?
That's it, man. Thanks for hanging out, chat. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys. We love you. Grace and peace.
That's my line.